In the dense green heart of the Maya lowlands, where the air once hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, the great cities rose like stone islands in a sea of forest. Tikal temples pierced the canopy. Reservoirs shimmered under the tropical sun. Markets pulsed with the voices of traders, the laughter of children, the measured tread of laborers carrying maize and cacao. Water was the quiet foundation of everything. It filled the reservoirs carved into the bedrock. It fed the milpas that sustained hundreds of thousands. It flowed through rituals that bound kings to gods and people to place. For centuries the system held. The rains returned with the seasons. The cisterns filled. The cities grew denser, more elaborate, more certain of their permanence. Yet beneath the surface of that certainty, a different force was already gathering. No one standing in those plazas could have imagined how completely the water would one day fail them. The classic Maya world was not a single empire, but a constellation of powerful city-states, each ruled by divine kings who claimed the ability to mediate between the human realm and the supernatural. Their engineers had mastered the capture and storage of rainwater in a landscape where rivers were scarce and groundwater often unreachable. Massive reservoirs, lined and maintained with care, held the life of the city through the dry months. Farmers timed their plantings to the predictable arrival of the wet season. Priests watched the skies. Scribes recorded the cycles. Daily life moved to the rhythm of water. The morning collection from household cisterns, the washing of clothes at the edges of reservoirs, the careful rationing during the leaner weeks. Children learned early that water was not infinite, yet the abundance of good years made scarcity feel like a distant story told by elders. The cities thrived. Monuments rose. Populations swelled. The system appeared invincible. But the collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the subtle lengthening of the dry season, in rains that arrived late or fell too lightly, in reservoirs that took longer to fill and emptied faster than memory suggested they should. At first, the changes were dismissed as ordinary variation. A dry year had always been followed by recovery. Farmers adjusted their plantings. Kings commissioned additional storage works. Rituals intensified. The early warnings were invisible to those living inside the pattern of their own success. The soil still produced. The markets still operated. The temples still received offerings. Only later would the sediment cores and cave records reveal the truth. A series of prolonged droughts had begun to settle over the region, reducing rainfall by margins that the elaborate water systems could not fully absorb. As the dry intervals lengthened, tension began to accumulate in ways that were social before they were purely environmental. Competition for remaining water sources sharpened. Fields that had once yielded reliably now required more labor for less return. Elite demands for tribute continued even as the agricultural base weakened. Warfare, already a feature of Maya politics, intensified as city-states sought to secure access to more reliable lands or to seize the stored resources of neighbors. The sacred relationship between king and cosmos came under quiet strain. If the ruler was the intermediary who ensured the rains, what did repeated failure imply? The people watched the levels of the great reservoirs drop. The smell of stagnant water replaced the clean scent of full cisterns. Silence fell over once busy plazas during the height of the dry season. Still, the institutions held. The system had not yet broken. It was only bending. Key decisions compounded the pressure. Rather than decentralize or reduce the scale of urban life, many centers doubled down on monumental construction and elite display, consuming resources that might have buffered the population. Water management, sophisticated as it was, remained dependent on the seasonal rains. There was no deep aquifer to fall back on across large portions of the lowlands. When multi-year droughts struck, some lasting 3 years, others stretching to 13 consecutive dry seasons, the reservoirs simply could not replenish. Maize failed. hunger spread. The political fabric, already taut from rivalry and inequality, began to fray. Kings who could not deliver water or food lost legitimacy. The elaborate calendars and inscriptions that had marked time and power grew less frequent. By the time, the signs became unmistakable. The margin for recovery had already vanished. The moment the system began to fail was not a single day but a cascade. In city after city across the southern lowlands, the construction of monuments ceased. The last dated stelae fell silent. Populations that had concentrated in urban centers for generations began to disperse. Reservoirs that had defined the life of the city turned into cracked basins. The sound of daily water collection faded. Markets emptied. The jungle, patient and relentless, began its slow advance into the plazas. What had been a dense, interconnected urban world started to unravel into smaller, more mobile groups seeking any remaining sources of moisture and food. The collapse was not instantaneous annihilation. It was the progressive abandonment of a way of life that could no longer sustain itself. Human consequences followed with brutal clarity. Famine and disease moved through the weakened populations. Social bonds strained under the weight of scarcity. Violence increased as groups competed for the last viable lands. Families left ancestral homes, carrying what they could, leaving behind the stone temples that had once promised permanence. The divine kings who had claimed cosmic authority disappeared from the record. The great urban experiment of the classic Maya lowlands did not end in a single catastrophic battle or natural disaster. It ended in the quiet, grinding exhaustion of a society that had built its density and complexity on a water regime that was no longer reliable. The people did not vanish. They adapted by becoming smaller, more dispersed, less dependent on the fragile urban concentrations that drought had rendered untenable. In the northern Yucatan, the process played out with variations of timing and intensity, but the underlying pattern repeated. Cities that had flourished under slightly different hydrological conditions eventually faced the same prolonged dryness. Even sophisticated water infrastructure could not overcome deficits that stretched across decades. The archaeological record shows waves of abandonment, shifts in settlement, and the eventual silencing of the most ambitious political centers. What remained were the ruins and the descendants who carried the language, the knowledge, and the memory into a transformed landscape. The urban breakdown was complete. The forest reclaimed the plazas, the reservoirs filled with sediment and vegetation. The water that had once made the cities possible had withdrawn, and with it, the social architecture that depended upon its presence. The long-term historical impact of this rupture extended far beyond the lowlands. The classic Maya collapse stands as one of the clearest documented cases of a complex urban society undone by the interaction of climate stress, resource limits, and institutional rigidity. It demonstrates how water scarcity does not merely reduce agricultural yields. It erodes legitimacy, intensifies conflict, forces migration, and ultimately dissolves the concentrated settlements that define urban life. Similar patterns appear in other regions and eras. The Akkadian cities of Mesopotamia under the 4.2 kiloyear drought, the ancestral Puebloan centers of the American Southwest during prolonged aridity, and later historical episodes where growing urban populations pressed against unreliable water supplies. Each case reveals the same vulnerability. Dense human settlements are water systems first and social systems second. When the water fails, the rest follows. What remains most haunting is the silence that settled over places once filled with human sound. The reservoirs that had reflected torchlight and temple walls became still. The pathways once worn smooth by thousands of feet disappeared under leaf litter. The knowledge of how to manage water at urban scale was not entirely lost, but the scale itself became impossible. Later Maya communities thrived in different configurations, proving resilience. Yet the great classic cities never returned to their former density or political complexity. The rupture was irreversible. The forest that reclaimed them stands as a quiet monument to the limits of even the most sophisticated human arrangements when the fundamental resource of water withdraws. In the end, the story of water scarcity and urban breakdown is not a tale of sudden catastrophe, but of a process that begins in the ordinary and ends in transformation. The Maya did not ignore their environment. They engineered it with remarkable skill. They simply could not engineer the climate that sustained it. The same tension exists wherever large numbers of people concentrate in places dependent on finite or variable water. The reservoirs fill, the cities grow, the assumptions of permanence take root. And somewhere, beyond the horizon of daily life, the rains begin to fail. By the time the signs become clear, the system has already begun its long, quiet descent into something smaller, something harder, something forever changed.